over the last few releases of Primavera, and we have had a lot of interest in this particular webinar. In fact, for those of you who are able to attend today, we're so glad that you could, because seats are limited, as you know, and in fact, we now have over 100 people on the waiting list to take part in this webinar who actually were not able to join today because we simply did not have enough lines to let them dial in. So we will make this webinar available over YouTube and our website, and also social media such as LinkedIn, to share this presentation with people who could not attend today. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce you to not only our organization, PPM Global Services, but also to our host today and our guest speaker, or our special guest. I'll put it that way. So our organization is PPM Global Services. We are a provider of project portfolio management, contract management, and scheduling solutions. As an Oracle Gold partner, PPM Global Services offers the strength of an authorized Oracle solution provider while maintaining the agility of a small company with the ability to deliver. We are headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, but we have team members throughout the United States, Primavera consultants and trainers, implementation specialists throughout the U.S. The services that we provide fall into three practice areas, and I'll just mention these briefly. First and foremost, we are an Oracle Primavera implementation provider, and so we provide installation, training, consulting, and implementation services around the Primavera suite of products. That includes Primavera P6, also Contract Manager, and we do some work in the unifier space as well. We've actually implemented Primavera on 3 continents. Our organization has implemented Primavera on 3 continents and across a variety of industries. So we have a lot of experience in this space. Our second area of practice is actually providing project management, project scheduling, and project controls personnel more in a staff augmentation relationship to organizations who may have peaks and valleys in their need for schedulers and project controls personnel. So we do a lot of contract-based work in that space. And then finally, our third practice area is that of a PMP and CAPM exam preparation company. And so what we do is we actually conduct boot camps, what we refer to boot camps. They are 3 days in duration, and where we help people who are studying for their PMP exam, and we prepare them to pass that test. So we can speak about those a little bit more as we go. We do have a couple of training classes that I want to make you aware of, and we have a very robust and a very broad offering of both Primavera and project management training classes. We offer these on a regular basis, so just want to alert you to our next training classes that we have coming up. We do have a training class. It's a 3-day Oracle Primavera P6 professional training class actually coming up next week. That's March 19th to the 21st. This training class covers the fundamentals of Release 8.3 for the Primavera Professional. It's a thick client software. What's important to know about this is we approach training for our public classes a little bit differently than most organizations do. For our public classes, we actually conduct training live and online. And what we find is that reduces the need or eliminates the need for people to travel for public training. We actually host the software. PPM Global Services hosts the software. So our students do not need to install the software. They don't need to actually own the software in order to participate in this class. This class will be taught by Carrie Evans, who is one of your hosts today. The next class that we have coming up for our PMP training sessions is July 14th through the 16th. This is a 3-day PMP online boot camp. Once again, it is live and online. We actually ship the course materials, the course curriculum, out to the students in advance of the class. So the instructor has a set of training slides for this material, and the student actually has the hard copy training curriculum in front of them that we ship to them in advance so that they can participate in the class. It's once again a 3-day format. And this class actually qualifies the student for the 35 contact hours required by the Project Management Institute to apply for the PMP exam. Now we have many more classes, and for a complete class schedule, please visit our website, ppmglobalservices.com, where you can find a complete listing of our training classes. Okay, I want to introduce today's speakers, and I mentioned myself, Jake Lilly with PPM Global Services Incorporated. Carrie Evans will be leading our demonstration of Visualizer today. We also have a special guest with us today, Steve Linder, who is an independent Primavera consultant. We consider Steve to be part of our team, part of our implementation family. He has a lot of great experience in this space, and I'll introduce him here in a moment. So a little bit more about me. As I mentioned, I'm the Director of Professional Services for PPM Global Services. I am certified as an Oracle Primavera P6 EPPM Implementation Specialist. I've been certified as a Primavera trainer as well. I've been certified as this funny title called a Scrum Master. For those of you doing any work in the Agile project management space, you'll recognize that, and for the rest of us, you'll just get a good laugh out of this title. And also, as we are not limited in our skills to Primavera, but we also do quite a bit of work with Microsoft Project and have expertise in that space. So I'd like to introduce Carrie Evans. Carrie has been part of our team now for several years, and she has just done a tremendous job here within the PPM Global Services family. And Carrie will be leading our demonstration today. Carrie is a certified Oracle Primavera P6 EPPM implementation specialist. She's also a certified contract management implementation specialist. She has a host of other certifications that are industry specific within the Oracle Primavera specialization, which include aerospace and defense, engineering and construction, oil and gas, natural resource specialist, and also she's also taught classes for Oracle University. So she brings a lot of skills to the table. Carrie, if you wouldn't mind, please go ahead and say hello. Let them, our participants get a chance to hear your voice, and I'll turn things over to you here in a few minutes.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Carrie. I'd like to introduce our special guest today, Steve Linder, and Steve has been a part of our team, a part of our implementation team for years now. He has tremendous experience in the space. Steve is actually an independent Primavera implementation consultant and trainer. He has approximately 20 years of experience implementing and training Primavera, and I probably have that number wrong. It could be even more than that. His industry experience includes power generation, transmission, and distribution, engineering, procurement, and construction. He has experience in the public sector as well as information technology. And one of the reasons we really wanted Steve to participate in our call today is Steve recently implemented Primavera Visualizer for a major utility in the southeast part of the U.S. So, Steve, you want to say hello to the audience and give them a chance to hear your voice as well?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. And Jake did have the number right. I'm not older than that, just 20 years of experience. So just recent this year. So look forward to the call.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us today, Steve. We really appreciate it. So, all right. What's next? What are the slides we have here, Carrie? Great. So at this point, I want to go ahead and turn things over to Carrie Evans. And she's going to, so how this will work is Carrie will actually lead the demonstration of Visualizer, and then if you would, as you have questions, please enter your own questions into the chat box of the GoToMeeting control panel, and then I will facilitate those questions to either Carrie or Steve, and we'll all just kind of answer those as a team and try to address those questions as you have them. So Carrie, I'm going to turn things over to you. Steve, please participate, comment, and add value along the way where you think it makes sense.
All right. Thank you, Jake. Thanks for that wonderful introduction as well. So today we're going to kind of just a high-level overview of how this webinar is going to go. I'm going to switch between my presentation, and then we'll actually look at the features and the functionalities we talk about in the presentation in the application itself. So this webinar will expose you to the functions of Primavera P6 Visualizer, Gantt chart options, timescaled logic diagram options, as well as report options. And as Jake mentioned, as you have questions throughout the webinar, please put those into the chat box and we'll answer those as they come. So what is Visualizer? Visualizer is a tool within Primavera P6 that focuses on time-phased or time-distributed graphical reporting. It's a replacement to, or rather an enhancement of, the timescale logic diagram that was released with version 8.0. It can be standalone, launched from your desktop or from your start menu, or launched from within Primavera P6 Client or Primavera P6 Professional. So you don't necessarily have to be a Primavera P6 user in order to utilize the features and the functionality within Visualizer. You'll use Visualizer to create Gantt charts and timescale logic diagrams for reporting. You can launch Visualizer, as we mentioned, from either your Tools menu within Primavera P6 Client. So if you're already logged into the application, you can launch it straight from there, or you can launch it from your Start menu or your desktop. Again, important to note, you don't have to be a P6 user in order to utilize Visualizer. Whenever using Visualizer and you're opening up or using the layout, you have a few different options. So you can create a new layout, a Gantt chart, or timescale logic diagram within Visualizer from scratch, or you can choose to open up an existing layout that maybe was created by another user or that you've created in the past. You also have the option to utilize those existing layouts as templates to create new layouts in the future. Whenever you're working in Visualizer, you have three types of layouts, and they'll be familiar to you if you do use P6. So you have your global layouts, which means that they're available to all users. You have your project-specific layouts, meaning that that layout is specific to the project for which you created it. And you also have user layouts, meaning you're the only person or the only user that will have the ability to utilize that layout. First, we'll talk about Gantt charts. Some features we'll look at within Visualizer are stacked fields. So you'll see in my screenshot here, we actually have the ability within Visualizer to stack our fields within the same column. So we see we have our activity ID and our activity name, start and finish, baseline, start and finish on top of each other, which allows us to have more room for the Gantt chart.
Carrie, one of the questions we get a lot are how many fields can actually be stacked in the Gantt chart?
So there's really not a reachable number. So I've played around with it a little bit, and you can actually set your fields up into the hundreds for the row. Now what Visualizer will do is it will fill in the gaps. So if you set a field at row 1 and then the next field at row 150, it's going to fill in the gap, and they'll fall at row 1 and then row 2. I've actually been able to stack up to 12 fields on top of each other within one column. Now that's not very visually appealing, but you do have the ability to do that. Another important thing to note is if you do have a field in the same space, so maybe in the same column and the same row, they will sit on top of each other, making that unable to be read and viewed in the report.
Steve, in your experience when you were helping the last utility that you were working with to create some of these layouts, did they find value in the stacked field feature? Did you really see them leveraging this function?
Yes, the stacked fields have been asked for a long time in Primavera, and like Carrie said, just to be able to utilize the space, it helps greatly. So you can see more of the Gantt chart on the right-hand side, which we'll see when Carrie goes through it. And to add a point to what she said, even though you can stack up to 12, 13, 14, 15 lines, doesn't mean you should. Because you are going to lose that visual. You're going to lose track of what things are. So you got to kind of temper it a little bit.
Great, that's a great point. You're absolutely right. Thank you, Steve.
The next thing we'll look at is a list of steps. So we'll see here in our activity table what we call a grid in Visualizer. We can actually see our steps with their step names as well as their % complete, which is something a lot of people would like to see within Primavera P6 Professional. They ask a lot, can I see my steps visually in the activity table or on a Gantt chart? And the answer is no within Primavera Professional, but within Visualizer you do have that ability.
Okay, so just to be clear, Carrie, you're saying that we can now show step labels on the Gantt charts, on the bars in the Gantt chart in Visualizer. That's a feature that Visualizer provides?
Absolutely, as well as the percent complete.
Okay, that's great, and that's a function people have been asking for a long time, and it's a limitation of trying to create a Gantt chart in Primavera P6 where you cannot show the step label. So that's a big enhancement.
Absolutely, and you have quite a few people who err on the side of not using steps because they don't have that visual within the Gantt chart or within the activity table.
That's a good point.
We also have controlled text wraps. So if you look at my screenshot, we can control the text wrapping per the field we're selected on. So I can choose to text wrap individual fields, but maybe not text wrap my dates or my costs, and text wrap my activity name or space.
Yeah, that's a big deal because if you text wrap in the software, it's text wrap for everything, right?
Absolutely. And similarly, we have varied font. So again, depending on what I'm selected on, what column or field I'm selected on, I can choose the font, the type of font, the style, whether that's italicized, bold, the size, and the color for that font. So if I wanted my baseline dates to pop out to me, I wanted them to be bold or bold and red, I could do that. And my last thing we'll look at is a variable timeline. This is kind of neat. You can see in my screenshot here, we have our timeline is showing a year, then month, and then week is the lowest detail we come to. But we can pull out a specific portion of time to see more detail. So within this portion of time, the week of January 9th, I've chosen to see the actual day in this time scale just for that variable period of time.
This feature right here has been asked for quite a bit over the years from Primavera, because there's a lot of industries out there that look at long-term, look only down to even the week or even the month, but they want to concentrate on an area they think might have issues. So out in the future, so that this Zoom has really come in handy for them.
Absolutely.
The other technique, planning technique this really supports is the idea of rolling wave planning. And for those of you on the phone who are familiar with rolling wave planning, the idea is that when we look at the long-term horizon, things further out in time, we don't need to look at those things in great detail. We look at them more at a summary level. So things that are maybe in the next quarter or even the second half of the year, something along those lines. So we want to really analyze the activities taking place in the future at more of a summary level. Whereas the near-term activities we want to see in greater detail, maybe down to a weekly level of detail or a daily level of detail, and these Zoom areas really support that idea of looking at the same project at different levels of detail because of the ability to adjust the granularity of the time scale in the same project on the same layout, and that's a major improvement over the P6 that client.
So now I'm going to move into Visualizer and show you the features that we just spoke about. First, I want to show you the different ways we can launch Visualizer. So first I said we can go to our Start menu. I use Visualizer often, so I can find it here in my recently used list. I can also navigate to All Programs, and I can find that in my Primavera P6 folder. So I go to Oracle Primavera P6, P6 Professional Release 8, and then Help and Tools, I can find Visualizer here. So I can launch it without actually being within the P6 Professional tool. It'll bring me then to a sign-in screen where I'll put in my credentials, and I'll also want to choose the database that holds the data that I want to report on. The other way I'm able to launch Visualizer is within Primavera Professional itself. So here I'll log into P6. And I can find that within my Tools menu. So if I go to my Tools menu and down to Visualizer, I can launch it there as well. So the only difference you'll see is that I don't now have to put in my credentials or choose my database, it already knows that because I'm logged into Primavera. So you'll see this is a pretty simple home screen. We have our plus sign here, which is allowing us to add a new layout, timescale logic diagram or Gantt chart. Our folder allows us to open an existing timescale logic diagram or Gantt chart. Then we can print. We also have a place for help. And this more allows me to either exit the application or manage my layout. So this just gives me a list of all the layouts I have, and it'll tell me the type of layout where I can do things like copy and paste, delete, move them to global, or move them to project. The first thing we're going to look at is opening an existing Gantt chart. So I'm going to select the folder button, go down to existing Gantt. This first window is going to ask me what project do I want to open, what project am I going to report on. You'll notice here that I see my EPS, or my Enterprise Project Structure. This holds my projects, and you'll notice that is very similar or looks exactly like the one that I have or am able to see in Primavera P6. Important to note is that the security that is set within Primavera is going to follow you here. So if I have restricted access to my EPS or restricted access to certain projects, that will be reflected within Visualizer. So I'm going to choose my project, and I can choose multiple projects here if I would like, and then I'll select next.
And Carrie, sorry to interrupt. Just to confirm, are you saying that Visualizer does honor the security privileges that have been assigned to the user in P6?
Yes, absolutely. So if even if it's not just that you're not able to see a project, you're not able to see a portion of the EPS, maybe you're just restricted to cost, viewing cost within a project, that will follow you into Visualizer.
Okay, so those same security privileges that would be granted to a user that would control what type of information the user can see in Primavera Professional, those carry over to Visualizer.
Absolutely.
Great.
Good question. So I'm going to choose a layout here. Notice that we are categorized by global, project, and user. I'm going to choose just my plan versus actual. And to view that layout, I'll select draw. So you'll see this is just my existing plan versus actual Gantt chart layout. I have my stacked fields, I have steps listed in the grid, and I have a variable timeline here at the top. Now from here, I can, if I wanted to make changes to this layout, I could select options, which will then take me to where I can customize this layout or modify it. I also then have the option to either save that to the current layout, overriding the changes that were there with the new changes I've made, or I can choose Save As and create a new layout. Also notice I have a refresh button here. This refresh button allows me to pull the most up-to-date information from P6. So since it is pulling that information from your P6 database, if you have a user working in there changing dates or changing the data within the project you're reporting on, you can pull that most up-to-date information by selecting refresh here.
That is important, excuse me, Carrie, that is important in industries like nuclear where you're doing hourly scheduling and you're scheduling constantly. If you're taking some time to build a layout in here, 20 minutes, 30 minutes to really refine it, you're going to want to hit refresh to be able to pull that most recent data. That's important.
So here I'm going to go ahead and close this, and we're going to look at another way you can create a new layout. So I could go to Save As and give it a new name, create a new layout that way. Or I can select my plus sign and select New Gantt. Again, I'll choose the project I wish to report on. And then this screen will ask me, what do I want to name this new layout? So I'll give this new layout a name, baseline versus actuals with costs. And then I have two options. I can either create this new layout from scratch or create it using an existing layout or using a template. I'm going to use a template. I'll select plan versus actuals as my starting point and select draw. So from here, we'll go just right back into that options like we did before, and we can start modifying the layout. So our first tab here is for our chart and grid. And this Content tab is going to ask me, what do I want to show in my layout? Do I want to show my Gantt chart and my grid? Again, the grid is the activity table. Do I want to just show the Gantt chart, or do I want to just show the grid? I also have what's unique to Visualizer. You don't have this option in Primavera. I can choose to put my grid either on the left side or the right side of my report. Now in Primavera, you only have that option to be on the left side. Then here we have our columns that we have listed in our report. This is where I can add, delete, or I can choose to go back to the default column set. I'm going to add a few columns here, so I'll just select Add. And then I can see when I double click all the options I have by category that I can add to my Gantt chart. I also have a search bar, so I can search if I know the name of the column I'm looking for. I can search for that in the search bar. So I'm going to add my actual total cost. And this is how we will see our fields being stacked. So we have a column and a row numbering. So I want this to be in column 5 and in row 1. I'm going to add another column. I'm going to add remaining total cost. I also want that to be in column 5 and on row 2. I'll add one more column. I'm going to add our baseline projects total cost. Again, I want that to be in column 5, but on row 3. So the next thing we can look at are...
Just real quick, Carrie. That's important, everybody. When you look at the row, make sure, I have a lot of people call me and say, everything's running over top of itself. Well, that row is very important. You can put it in the column, but make sure your row is spaced, is stepped. 1, 2, 3, like Carrie just did. Just a little reminder.
That's a good point, Steve. Or else you'll see it right on top of each other and it'll look like a jumbled mess.
Right.
So the next thing we can look at are the font, the varied font we spoke about. So if I select on my actual total costs and I want to see my report, I want the differences in these costs to jump out at me. So I'll know that my actual total cost, if I change this font style to italic, I'll know that when I see an italicized number, that's my actual.
Mm-hmm.
My remaining total costs, I'm going to leave that as a regular font. And for my baseline total costs, I'm going to make that bold. And then the next thing we'll look at here is our text wrapping. So as we said, we can select on these different fields and decide what we would like to be text wrapped. So I can remove that text wrapping on my costs, and I'll still see that text wrapping here for my other columns. So if we select Draw and Save, we can see the progress we've made here. So we see our stacked fields. We see our new actual, remaining, and total costs. You can see the varied font there as well. I'm going to go back to Options here, and we'll move over to the Timescale tab. The Timescale tab, in our primary section, we're going to tell Visualizer what period of time we would like to look at. So I'm looking at the entire project here, from project start to project finish. I have the option to start at my data date, the current month, week, day, or a custom date. So I do have the option if I wanted to do like maybe a 1-week look ahead or a 1-month look ahead, I have that option. The background is telling us what is our time scale. So this checkbox here at top is telling us what we're showing on top. So I'm going to show my year, and then my month is going to be the most detail that I'm going to see. I don't have that checkbox here for weeks, so that won't be displayed in my time scale.
Carrie, real quick, I can go all the way down to hour, right? Or can I only go down to day? Okay, hour.
You can go down to hour. So your options are hour. You can use the day name or number. So if you don't have very much space, you want to use the number rather than the name. Week, month, quarter, and year.
Good deal. Thanks.
If we choose to show sight lines, if I wanted to show sight lines for the year, this interval frequency is just going to tell me I'm going to see a sight line every year. I'll see that sight line. And our styling here is just asking us the font we would like that time scale to be displayed as, the background color, things like that. Now we talked about the variable timeline. That's this zoom area here. So we have our zoom area, which is saying we want to zoom in on this point in time. So for our first zoom area, we have that custom date of May 13th through May 27th. This zoom percentage is just asking us how much do we want to zoom. So as an example, if you have the primary time scale set to a week and the zoom area set to day, the zoom percentage is set to 700, that's going to make one day equal to the width of 1 week. So it's just asking how much do we want to zoom in. The background is going to remain the same.
Carrie, we have a question from the audience. How many of these zoom areas can be configured for a given layout?
It's a good question, and you can have as many as you need. There's no limit.
Okay, so it's not limited. There's no limit to the zoom areas that you can add. You can have different areas, any number of zoom areas.
Exactly, and similarly to the point Steve touched on with the stacked columns, keep in mind that you probably don't want to have 20 zoom areas because it's not going to be very visually appealing, but you can have as many as you need.
Okay, great.
So we'll add a zoom area here, so we can have 2. I'll add a zoom area. I'll just select the plus to do that. So in our zoom area 2, I'm going to choose to show July 8th. And I'm just going to show that week, so through July 15th. Down in our background here, I'm going to uncheck month, and I'm going to check our day. I'm going to change that to day number. We don't have that much space on our Gantt chart to be able to see the actual name of the day. We'll see 10 instead of Wednesday. And up here is where I can change the color. So we had a zoom area that was highlighted in yellow before. You want to make that stand out, that there's more detail in that timeline or that varied timeline. So you can change that color so it stands out more. So select Draw and Save. You can see here that color showing me that July 8th we're seeing in more detail. And before we move into bars and lines and groups, filtering page setup, we're going to talk about timescale logic diagram. All these tabs are going to be applicable to both Gantt charts and timescale logic diagrams. So timescale logic diagrams is just a graphic representation of the tasks and logic across time. It's meant to condense the Gantt chart to a more understandable and comprehensive picture of the project. Some features we'll look at are multiple customizable bars per activity. So you can see here I have a critical current bar as well as my yellow baseline bar. And I can have more than just 2. We'll add a 3rd bar to our timescale logic diagram here. I can also have, as we spoke about before, a list of activity steps on the bar label. So before we saw it in the grid, here we can actually see it on the bar label itself. So we can also have up to 15 spaces where we can add bar labels onto any given bar. So here in our screenshot we can see our activity ID and activity name are in the number 2 section, and we've added the step to the 12 section. And finally, we also have a variable timeline within timescale logic diagrams as well. So let's move back into Visualizer. I'm going to close this Gantt chart layout, and we're going to look at the timescale logic diagram. So I'm going to select the plus sign and add a new timescale logic diagram. I'm going to choose my project, and then I'll give this layout a name. I'm going to call it Baseline Comparison, Project, User, Actuals. Again, we're going to start from an existing. We'll use a template. I'm going to choose Baseline versus Actuals with steps, choose Draw. And this is our starting point for our timescale logic diagram. You'll notice the differences here between this and the Gantt chart is I don't have those bars kind of waterfalled out. I can have more than one activity bar on the same row, showing that truly across a timescale. So to modify this, I'll select Options, We're going to move over to bars and labels. You'll see that this timescale area works exactly the same way as it does in Gantt Charts. So move over to bars and labels. And here you'll see, first on the left side, our available bars. So these are the bars that we are currently displaying. The selected bar here is going to show how that will display. And then I'll have a full preview of all the bars that I'm displaying here at the bottom. This is where I would add or delete bars. So I can add a bar here. And over in the properties section is where we determine what that bar is going to show us. So in the bar type, I'm going to choose primary baseline. And then I'll name that bar over in available bars. So I'll just type in primary user baseline. It's important to note that you're choosing what the bar shows in properties. You're just giving it a name within available bars, whatever you choose for that name to be. So if we look at the top here, where we have our bars and endpoints, this is just showing us that this is a bar. If it were a milestone, you can see a start point and an end point. If we move down to fill, this is where we determine the color of our bar. So we can have that be a solid color or have that gradient kind of faded look to it. So I can change that bar color so I know that this is my primary baseline. And then underneath that we have the shape of the bar. So do we want that to be rounded edges or do we want that to kind of be at a point? And how large do we want that bar to be? We have some additional options in the top right-hand corner. So in arrangement, we'll choose the row. So right now you'll see in our full preview that our primary baseline bar is sitting on top of our current bar. So we'll want to move that to row 3. I'll just select out here to refresh that preview, and you can see that now drops it to row 3. We can also filter our bars. This is a normal bar, so I'm not going to change that, but if maybe I wanted to see global or just completed activities or just in progress activities, I could choose that filter here. Notice that we do have that standard set of default filters that we can choose from. We can choose the border for our bars, the color, the thickness, the style. And we can choose to have bar necking, so we can see that slimming down of the bar either for calendar non-work time or for activity non-work intervals. So if maybe my activity is suspended for some reason, I'll see that necking there.
Just real quick, Carrie, to clarify, what you're highlighted on the left-hand side represents everything you're doing on the right-hand side, right?
Absolutely, and that's a good point. Whatever you're selected on here is the bar you're modifying. Good question. And finally, we have color by code, which is kind of a neat feature. So we can color our bars based on the activity codes. If I select this checkbox, it's then going to give me a list down here of codes, and it is intuitive. It's looking at the activity codes assigned to this project and giving me a list here. So if I choose a code, I can then choose a color for each code value. So then if I saw in my timescale logic diagram a green bar, I would know that Andy Mason is responsible for that activity. So if I select Draw and Save here, you can see the progress we've made. We see that third purple primary baseline bar. Moving over to lines, we can choose to show relationship lines. We have all relationships or just driving relationships. And then we can choose the style of those lines, the color, the thickness. Do we want that to be dotted? Do we want it to be solid? What's kind of neat is in the Connections tab, we can choose to show connection details for all visible activities. So when that's checked, I can choose to see the project ID, show project or activity ID. I can choose to show lag, which is a big one. A lot of people ask, can I see lag visually in my Gantt chart? The answer in P6 Client is no, you can't see that visually in the Gantt chart. But here in Visualizer, you actually have that ability to see that there may be as 5 days of lag between an activity and its predecessor.
Boy, that is such an important feature, because tracking down lag in the P6 Professional Client is not an easy thing to do, and so the ability to display those relationship types and the lag values on the Gantt chart really helps to present to the stakeholders and the team what's happening during that period of time. Yeah, Steve, did you find that the last organization you worked with, did they see, were they using that feature, or did they see value in that?
Absolutely. They that was one of the first things they asked about for printing out Gantt charts and timescale logic. Am I going to be able to see my lag and my relationship type between activities? And the answer was yes, by using the visualizer. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Very beneficial. And it's been asked for a long time, Jake, as you know.
Yeah, because I believe in P3 we had the ability to show relationship types with lag, and that was just a logical. Why wouldn't you put it on the Gantt chart, right? That's what everybody needs to see. And in P6 you were very limited in that regard.
So our next tab here is for the data date. We can choose how we want that data date to be displayed, what color we would like it to be, the style, the thickness, or if we want to show it at all. So I'll go ahead and select Draw and Save, and I'll point out to you we have our relationship type and our lag here. Remember, we did have that option to only show lag whenever it's greater than 0 or when it's not 0. So it's not cluttering every relationship bar or every relationship line here. Next, we'll move over to Group and Sort. So I have the option to group my activities within the timescale logic diagram. If I select Add here, you can see all the different options I have whenever I would like to group. So if I want to do that by activity code or cost or WBS, I have that option. I can also search here for different fields if I know what I would like to group by. So if I choose WBS name, I'll just show you how that looks in the timescale logic diagram. You can see it's just going to give a solid grouping line and have the activities grouped underneath that.
That's good.
And then we'll move over to filters. So I can also filter these activities. If I maybe wanted to just show critical activities or only in progress activities, not started or in progress, I have that option. You'll see these standard filters that we have. These are the same that we see in P6 Professional. And I also have the option to add filters. So if I select Add here, I can then set the parameters for that filter and the details on the right side. It's also neat that if I select on any one of these filters, I can see the parameters for the filter. So I know what I'm applying to the project or to the view. Before we move into page setup, I want to look at our timescale logic diagram final product. So we see here all the changes we've made. We have our labels, our relationship lines. When we're looking at page setup, just setting up our report to print. We can look at page scaling, paper size, and margins. The number of horizontal sheets that you see here is just basically saying how large do we want this image to be displayed. How crowded would we like those activities to be viewed on the timescale logic diagram or in the Gantt chart. So the higher the number that you have in this field, the longer your bars are going to be, the more room you're going to have for labels. Our title block, that's just going to be headers and footers. We can choose to show a header and a footer on very different pages. We can select different variables we want to show there, and those variables can be intuitive. So you see on the screenshot we have current date and project name. So I don't have to type in that date and that project name. It knows what project I'm opening. It knows what the date is, and it's going to display that. And finally, spacing. So we have maximum rows to move an activity above a related activity. That is unique to the timescale logic diagram. You won't see that option in page setup for the Gantt chart. And then line spacing. So we go back to options here and over to page setup. Again, we have our horizontal sheets. I'm going to leave that at 1. Our tabloid paper size set 11 by 17, and our margins 1 inch around. If we look at our title block, we can set up our headers and our footers. So I have the option to show that on the first page, the last page, all pages, or not show it at all. And I can choose to show a legend. So I can have a legend for my dates, for my bars, what those colors mean, activity codes, which is a big one if you are coloring your bars by activity code. and your lines. What's the difference between a red solid line and a black dotted line? I can choose to show my header. I can choose to show section borders. And here I can actually also add a variable here. So if I wanted to add maybe my data date to this report, I would choose here the data date and select the plus sign.
And Carrie, real quick, I'm able to add company logos and things like that, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
You can modify the color, the font, all sorts of things within these headers and footers. And the footer is going to function the same way as your header. So finally, moving over to spacing, we have our maximum rows to move an activity above a related activity. This is just making sure that you don't have a related activity that falls 20 lines below its predecessor or successor. So this is always going to try to move the activity up rather than down. But if it can't move the activity up and have that make sense, it's going to move them both down so that they can be together. Now, if you have this set to 0, you're basically telling Visualizer that there's no limit to the number of rows between related activities. And again, that is specific to timescale logic diagrams. And then your line spacing, that's just the space between activity rows. So if we select Draw and Save. Oh,
yeah,
sorry,
real quick, Carrie. Whenever I save a layout in Visualizer, all my page setup is saved as well, right? Which is important.
Absolutely, and that's a good point. That's why I always like to create my layouts from templates, because at the very least, if nothing else is going to be the same, I at least have that page setup already made for me. That's a good question. So if I select Draw and Save here, I can then print this layout. You'll see we have our new data date added to the top. To print, I'll just select the print icon. It's going to give me a print preview here of our report. I can then print that. Obviously, you'd want to choose whatever print option you're looking for. And then I have my finished product here. I can print that to PDF. I can send that to the printer. So just a quick review before we open it up for questions of the things we've talked about today. So we talked about Gantt charts. We talked about the fact fields. We've talked about the steps in the % complete we can see within the grid, as well as the controlled text strap and varied font based on the selected field. We also talked about the variable timeline. So we can add more detail to a specific portion of time within our time scale. We covered timescale logic diagrams, multiple bars per activity, multiple labels per activity. Remember, we can have up to 15 labels on one activity bar. And again, the variable timeline within timescale logic diagrams. We saw page setup, so we looked at the number of horizontal sheets, meaning that number as it grows, the more space we're going to have for labels. Our headers, our footers, and our spacing. We also talked about the different ways you can launch Visualizer, so either from the Start menu or your desktop or within P6 Client. And finally, how we can refresh data to retrieve updates from P6 and make sure we're reporting on the most up-to-date project information. I think if we have any questions, we can go ahead and open it up for that.
Yeah, you know, I have a question for Steve actually. Steve, when you've been working with companies, have you found that that they use Visualizer to create? Are they more likely to use Visualizer to create timescale logic diagrams, or are they more likely to actually use Visualizer to create the enhanced Gantt charts? The reason I ask is, you know, I think the big selling point of Visualizer, people tend to think right away about timescale logic diagrams, which you really can't do in a practical way in P6 Professional.
You're exactly right.
But it seems to me that there's so many features and functions of the enhanced Gantt chart that organizations almost find at least as much, even more value using the enhanced Gantt charts. What has been your experience there?
Well, yeah, you're exactly right. When Primavera or Oracle first started announcing that they were coming out with Visualizer to bring back timescale logic, that was the focus. Everybody missed timescale logic. They wanted it back in the system, and that was the focus. But more and more when I'm on site with organizations, they see the timescale logic, they're happy it's there and all the things they can do, but then when they realize just how much they can do with Gantt, that's a big deal. Especially the stacking of the column headers, the zoom and the timescale, all the being able to put relationship type and lag. They love it. They really do. And also you're able to, in P6 you might not have it set up, but P6 is able to batch these reports as well. So if you run them on a weekly basis, daily basis, monthly basis, you can batch them. So, which is nice.
Right. Okay. And so another question that came up in actually our last webinar was, I believe there have been some performance improvements made during the 8.3 release of Visualizer. Can you speak to that and kind of your experience there?
On the last client I was at, Service Pack 1, they were running it on Service Pack 1, and it was a little slow for larger projects. Once you got up into the 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 range of activities, it was a little slow in actually developing the layout on screen. But once you went from 8.3 to Service Pack 2, those concerns were lifted. It was a lot faster. So Primavera or Oracle said that Service Pack 2, their main enhancement was speed for Visualizer. So.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay. All right. So I think we're right up on the end of our hour here, and I want to thank Carrie for just an outstanding demonstration of P6 Visualizer. And I thought it was a great overview. Certainly I learned a lot during this. I want to thank Steve Linder for joining us today as our special guest and bringing his knowledge and his experience to this conversation. And I want to thank our guests as well, our audience participants who submitted questions and attended. And this has been this is one webinar in a series of webinars that we will continue to do as an organization. So we ask you to come back. We ask you to come back and participate, ask good questions. We are in the process of getting a YouTube channel in place where we will post these webinars. We will also post these videos to our website along with a PDF version of the PowerPoint slides, so you'll be able to download those and reference them if you want to share some of this information with your team internally. Again, we definitely want to remind you about our public training classes that we conduct. Our next one's coming up next week, actually, on the P6 Professional Fundamentals training class, and then our PMP training class. Our next PMP training class is July 14th through the 16th. Once again, for a complete listing of those training classes, please visit our website at ppmglobalservices.com. And thank you very much for your time, attendance, and participation today. And we hope everybody has a great weekend. Thank you.